Today, we will learn and reflect on the writings of Seneca. Seneca and the Stoics were the self-help gurus of the ancient world. You may ask, how can we benefit when we ponder the Stoicism of Seneca? Living a godly and moral life is all that mattered to the Stoic philosophers. In this video, we will ponder what Seneca tells us about how virtues are not changed by suffering, the virtues of kindness and graciousness, the healing power of forgiveness and true wisdom, and many other wise sayings of Seneca. At the end of our talk, we will discuss the sources for this video and my blogs that also cover this topic. Please, we welcome interesting questions in the comments. Sometimes these generate short videos of their own. Let us learn and reflect together. To Seneca, virtue is not like the house built on sand that is swept away by the first storm. Virtue is the house built on the rocks, the house that stands firm against the waves and the storms that crash against the rocks. And Seneca tells us, neither extreme moves the Stoic philosopher. What then, you say, is there no difference between joy and unyielding endurance of pain? None at all. For joy, there is a natural relaxation and loosening of the soul. For suffering, there is an unnatural pain. Virtue does not change by either extreme. Hard and stubborn suffering does not make virtue worse, and pleasant joy does not make virtue superior. Seneca says that every honorable act is voluntary, but if the honorable act is done with reluctance, complaints, cowardice, or fear, it loses its best characteristic, self-approval. You may ask, are you trying to make us believe that it does not matter whether a man feels joy or whether he lies upon the rack and tires out his torturer? I might answer, Epicurus also maintains that the wise man, though he is being burned in the bowl of Phalaris, will cry out, "This is pleasant and concerns me not at all." Now here Seneca is referring to an ancient torture. The hapless victim is forced into the hollow iron bowl of Phalaris, in which he is roasted alive over a blazing fire. As Seneca says, there is an equality between feeling joy with self-control and feeling pain with self-control. Joy is more desirable, but enduring suffering is more admirable. While joy is more desirable than suffering, the virtue that enables us to patiently endure hardships is more desirable. Seneca asks, what's the purpose of all this? That you may know that virtue regards all her works in the same light, as if they were her children, showing equal kindness to all and still deeper kindness to those who encounter hardships. For even parents feel more affection towards their children, whom she pities most. Now this reminds us of the father in the parable of the prodigal son. The father loves both his older son and his prodigal son. He loves his older son, and all that he has will be given to him. But for the prodigal son, who was lost in a faraway land but has now returned, though he has squandered all his wealth, the father forgives and rejoices, killing the fatted calf for a celebration. Virtue shines like the sun. Seneca says, vexation and pain and other inconveniences are powerless, for virtue overcomes them. Just as the brightness of the sun dims lesser lights, so virtue by its brilliance shatters and overwhelms all pains, annoyances, and wrongs. Whenever virtue's radiance shines, all other lights are extinguished. Inconveniences are like clouds over the sea. The Stoic philosophers, in particular Epictetus, often refer to either God or Zeus as if he were a monotheistic god like the Christian God. We see this in a letter by Seneca. And this is what Seneca says about the supreme good. For our life to have purpose, for us not to have lived our life in vain, we must purpose our lives toward the supreme good, that which is honorable. Seneca says our plans miscarry when they have no aim. When a man knows not what harbor is his destination, no wind is the right wind. Seneca says that which is honorable is the only good. All other goods are alloyed and debased. When you love virtue with devotion, for mere loving is not enough. Anything that has been touched by virtue will be fraught with blessing and prosperity for you, no matter how it shall be regarded by others. All the sufferings of life which others regard as ill will become manageable and will end in good if you succeed in rising above them. Seneca quotes Socrates, "Allow any man who wishes to insult you and harm you, but if only virtue dwells within you, you will suffer nothing." Now, one reason why I'm so fond of the Stoic philosophers is so many Christians have this notion that if they just pray to God, that God will deliver them and their loved ones from suffering, sickness, and death, and will guarantee them a life free from worries and trials and tribulations if only they pray. Then they get mad at God when they think He has broken His end of the bargain when life throws challenges and sufferings their way. Indeed, Seneca says the wise man is happy in his sufferings, for unless a man is happy, he has not attained the supreme good. If only virtue exists in a man, and if adversity does not impair his virtue, and though the body be injured, virtue abides unharmed. Seneca observes the happiness of those who are still shy of perfection, those whose happiness can be aborted, but the joy of a wise man is a woven fabric, a joy not rent by chance, nor by a change in fortune. For at all times and all places a wise man is at peace. The joy of a wise man depends on nothing external and looks for no boon from man or fortune. A wise man's happiness is something within himself. It is born there. As St. Augustine teaches, those who are truly happy are those who love God and who love their neighbor as themselves. They never complain of their sufferings. Seneca also has many thoughts on friendship. My former friend, or maybe my former acquaintance, as I haven't heard from her in quite a long time, was always complaining about her friends who always took advantage of her friendship. She kept a scorecard on her friends, how many times she called them versus how many times they called her, how often she visited them, how often they visited her, how many favors she did them, how many favors she received in turn, and if her friends weren't as friendly to her as she was to them, they were no longer her friend. Seneca, no doubt, had met many people like my former friend. Seneca says, "You complain, you know, an ungrateful person. If this is a new experience for you, you should be thankful for either your good luck or your abundant caution. But beware, lest such caution make you less generous." The keeper of a scorecard in a friendship risks running off his friends. How should the good man keep his scorecard? This is how. The good man voluntarily cheats himself by adding to the benefits he receives and subtracting from the injuries he suffers. Perhaps this is another definition of patience and kindness, the first attributes of love and friendship. It is better to get no return than to confer no benefits. Even after a poor crop, one should sow again. Perhaps next year's crop will be a bumper crop. It is worth being patient with many ingrates to find one grateful person. When the outcome of any undertaking is unsure, you must try again and try again, so ultimately you may succeed. Who truly benefits from our kindness? The reward for all virtues lie in the virtues themselves. Virtues do not seek recognition or plaques or even encouragement. The wages of a good deed lie in the doing of the deed. Seneca affirms, "I am grateful not so my neighbor should reward me for my act of kindness, but rather I am grateful to perform the acts of loving kindness. I feel grateful, not to profit for my kindness, but for the pleasure of being kind." Seneca says, "Let us avoid being ungrateful, not for the sake of others, but for our own sake." Likewise, Seneca warns, evil drinks the largest portion of her own poison. When we do wrong, only the least portion flows back upon our neighbor. The worst and densest portion blows back, troubling us instead. The ungrateful man tortures and torments himself. He hates his gifts, for he must return the favor. He tries to belittle their value, but when he does, he hurts himself instead. What is more wretched than the man who forgets his benefits and clings to his injuries? The wise, on the other hand, are gracious. The wise look for good. The wise are forgiving. Those who are evil find faults with their neighbor, but find excuses for their own faults. While those who seek to love their neighbors seek to see the good in their neighbors' hearts, excusing their faults, while searching their hearts and repenting of their shortcomings. The wise man lives a life of purposeful naivety. Seneca agrees, saying, "Wisdom lends grace to every benefit and delights her soul by recollecting the benefit." But the wise man takes delight not so much from receiving a gift as in having received it, and this joy never perishes, abiding always. Although the wise man may despise the wrongs done to him, he forgets them, not accidentally, but voluntarily. The wise man does not put a wrong construction upon everything, or seek someone to blame, but rather he ascribes even the sins of men to chance. The wise man will not misinterpret a word or deed. He makes light of all mishaps by interpreting them in the most generous way possible. He does not remember the injury, rather the wise man remembers the earlier and better deed, except, of course, when the bad deeds totally overwhelm the good deeds. The best example is Joseph in the Bible. His brothers contemplated murdering him for the favor shown to him by his father Jacob, and so the brothers sold him into slavery. After suffering much, he rose in power to become the viceroy to the Pharaoh. Famine struck. No grain grew in Israel. The land was hungry. So the brothers traveled to Egypt to buy grain to avoid starvation, not knowing Joseph's fate, not knowing that he had been put in a position of authority by the Pharaoh. Joseph did not reveal himself to his brothers and put them through many trials to see if they had repented of their great sin. And this story in Exodus is a really captivating story. Here are some interesting excerpts. When the brothers traveled to Egypt to buy grain, they were accused and brought before the official of Pharaoh, which was Joseph. Assuming that the man standing before them could not understand Hebrew, the brothers talked among themselves while they were being questioned. Alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this anguish has come upon us. Then Reuben answered them, Did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you would not listen. So here comes a reckoning for his blood. After the brothers had made several trips to Egypt, over 10 chapters in Genesis, and we encourage you to read these for yourself, Joseph revealed himself to them and invited his father and brothers to settle in the Egyptian delta to escape the famine. And after some years, their father died. The scriptures tell us, realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers asked, What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him? So the brothers approached Joseph, saying, Your father gave us this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now therefore please forgive the crime of the servants of God your father. Joseph wept, and his brothers also wept, falling down before him, and said, We are here as your slaves. But Joseph said to them, Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I will myself provide for you and your little ones. In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. So Joseph lived the advice that Seneca gives us about forgiving our brothers. And Seneca gives us advice that will keep us from being tempted to judge the sins of our neighbor. Seneca tells us the first and worst penalty of sin is to have committed sin. And although the thief may grow rich through crime, although fortune may protect the thief, crime never goes unpunished, since the punishment lies in committing the crime itself. For the criminal lives in constant fear, constant terror, never secure, never sleeping peacefully, always wakened by the pangs of conscience. Even men who hide their sins can never count on remaining hidden, for their conscience convicts them and reveals them to themselves. And the worst punishment for crime lies in the crime itself. This is best illustrated by one of my favorite stories told by Epictetus. One night a thief stole his lamp. The thief thought he got the best part, but actually Epictetus got the better end of the exchange. For Epictetus only lost his lamp, but he kept his faith. The man who stole his lamp, in exchange for the lamp, he consented to become a thief, becoming faithless. Epictetus tells us further, forgiveness is better than revenge. Forgiveness shows gentleness. Revenge shows savagery. And many of the sayings by Seneca are echoed in the works of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. And as you can see, we have another video on Epictetus. Seneca tells us, the soul is more powerful than fortune. On its own, the soul can produce a happy life or a wretched life. A bad man makes everything bad, but an upright and honest man can correct the wrongs of fortune, softening hardship and bitterness through endurance, accepting prosperity with appreciation and moderation, standing up to troubles with steadfastness and courage. So both sufferings and success should make us better persons. Seneca tells us that though we sometimes need to be wary of those who might cause us harm, we still need to treat each other by the golden rule to love our neighbor as ourselves. Seneca warns us not to trust the countenances of those whom we meet. Men may appear to be kind in their appearances, but often men possess souls of brutal beasts in their heart. The difference is beasts may attack you when they first encounter you from fear or hunger, Once your paths depart, beasts will usually not pursue you further. Men, however, scheme and often delight in destroying one another, making each other's lives miserable. How should you treat your fellow man? Seneca tells us, try in all your dealings with others to harm not, in order that you not be harmed. This is the negative form of the command to love your neighbor as yourself. What is the positive command? You should rejoice with your neighbor in all his joys and sympathize with him in all his troubles, remembering what you should offer and what you should withhold. What should we offer? That which increases the love in our hearts. What should we withhold? The bitterness and anger and resentments that so often poison our relationships. Mere men may be impressed by our outward actions, but God, who alone can truly see into our heart, knows our motives. It is our motives that determine whether we act selflessly in love or selfishly. As Seneca observes, the credit lies not in the actual deed, but in the way it is done. As our acts and our thoughts are, so will our lives be. Seneca provides an example. When people sit by the bedsides of their sick friends, we honor their motives. But when people do this to attain a legacy of an inheritance, then they are like vultures waiting for carrion. The same act may be either honorable or shameful. The motive makes all the difference. That's a wonderful saying. The same act may be honorable or shameful. The motive makes the difference. Many of the important decisions we face in our life, though they have a moral component, are neither right nor wrong in themselves, but rather should be judged often by how the decisions are made and by examining the underlying motive. And some examples are of these vexing questions. Should we divorce a cheating spouse? Should we place an elderly parent in a nursing home? Or if we're an employer, what should we do when a long-term employee starts slipping in his performance at work? And Seneca tells us this on the vitality of the soul. Let each man convince himself of this before all else. I must be just without reward. And that is not enough. Let him convince himself also of this. May I take pleasure in devoting myself of my own free will to uphold this, the noblest of virtues. Seneca says, let all your virtues be turned as far as possible from your personal interests. You need not look about for the reward of a just deed. A just deed in itself offers a still greater return. Remember this, it makes no difference how many are aware of your righteousness. If you wish your virtue to be advertised, you are not striving for virtue, but for praise. Seneca continues, are you not willing to be just if you are not praised for your justice? Nay, indeed, often you will be despised for your just behavior rather than praised. If you are wise, let ill repute, well won, be a delight. Likewise, Jesus in the Beatitudes warns us that we may be treated badly by our neighbor. In the Beatitudes, he reassures us, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Seneca reminds us, nobody inherits good before evil. Evil inclinations get first hold on all of us. Learning virtue means unlearning vice. We must free ourselves from our faults with courage, for once we attain it, the good can be an everlasting possession. Virtue is not unlearned. But since the weak and diseased mind fears the virtue that is unfamiliar, the first steps to attaining steadfast virtue are toilsome. The mind must be forced to make the first step, but from then on the medicine is not as bitter. Living a good life brings joy and happiness. The draught of philosophy is both wholesome and pleasant. Seneca tells us, we Stoics believe that pleasure is a vice. Like the Church Fathers, Seneca reminds us that we need to overcome many years of bad habits with many future years of leading a godly life. We are fettered and weakened by many vices. We have wallowed in them for a long time, and it is hard for us to be cleansed. Seneca asks, why does folly hold us with such an insistent grasp? Primarily because we do not combat our vices vigorously. We do not struggle towards salvation with all our might. We do not trust and drink in the words of the wise with open hearts. We are not serious in struggling against our vices. We do not strive to live a godly life. Seneca then asks us, but how much can a man learn in his struggle against his vices if the time he devotes to learning is only the time left over from his vices? The wise man is never deprived of joy. This joy springs only from the knowledge that you possess the virtues. If you seek pleasures of all types, then you must know that you are as far short of wisdom as you are short of joy. Some of Seneca's saying remind us that he is indeed a wealthy man, and also that his wealth can be a curse, as when he says that it is often the misfortune of the wealthy man is that he believes men to be his friends when he himself is not a friend to them, and that he deems his favors to be effective in winning friends, although for some men the more they owe you, the more they hate you. A trifling debt makes a man your debtor. A large debt, on the other hand, makes a man your enemy. Money never made a man rich. It always smites men with a greater craving for wealth. We are unequal in wealth at birth, but are equal in death. Everybody who reads Seneca finds different treasures, as you will each time you read his discourses. These are some of the nuggets of wisdom that struck me while reading Seneca. He reminds us nothing is shut off from the sight of God. He is the witness of our souls. He comes into the midst of our thoughts. We must be ever vigilant. I shall keep watching myself continually. I will adopt the habit of reviewing each day. And it reminds us of the verse of St. Paul that we should take every thought captive to obey Christ. Seneca continues, this is what makes us wicked, that we do not look back upon our life. Our thoughts are devoted only to what we are about to do, but yet our plans for the future always depend on our past. Seneca warns us that lions and tigers can never be tamed. They might lull you into thinking that they are like loving kittens, but then the beast in them will go mad and they roar and pounce on their master. Vices are never genuinely tamed. Like lions and tigers, it is easier to stop vices in the beginning than to control them when they gather force. We are in love with our vices. We uphold them and prefer to make excuses for them rather than to shake the vices off. Some other nuggets of wisdom. Live among men as if God beheld you. Speak with God as if men were listening. Seneca observed, philosophy is both theoretic and practical. It contemplates and at the same time acts. Take refuge with philosophy. She will cherish you in her bosom, and in her sanctuary you will be safe. We should toughen our minds and remove them far from the allurements of pleasure. Seneca says, it is as foolish to fear death as to fear old age, for death follows old age precisely as old age follows youth. The outcome of a mighty anger is madness. Therefore anger should be avoided, not merely so we may escape excess, but so we may have a healthy mind. A friend may love you, but not everyone who loves you is your friend. Friendship is always helpful, but sometimes love hurts. Try to perfect yourself so you may learn how to love. Another famous Seneca aphorism, it is not important how long you live, but rather how nobly you live. Often living nobly means you cannot live long. Seneca writes in his letter on conquering the conqueror, philosophy bestows this boon upon us and makes us joyful in the very sign of death, strong and brave, no matter in what state the body shall be, cheerful and never failing though the body may fail us. A great accomplishment would be to depart calmly when the inevitable hour arrives. It is as foolish to fear death as to fear old age, for death follows old age precisely as old age follows youth. He who does not wish to die cannot have wished to live. Seneca says, philosophy teaches us to worship that which is divine, to love that which is human. Philosophy has told us that with God lies dominion, and among men fellowship. The fellowship remained unspoiled for a long time until avarice tore the community asunder and became the cause of poverty, even among the wealthy. For men cease to possess all things the moment they desire all things for their own. Selfishness ruins fellowship, selfishness splits communities, but selflessness binds men together. Now, we invite you to ponder our introductory video on Seneca with some background information and other interesting observations on living the godly life. And we would like to discuss some of the sources we used for our video. The main source is the Stoic six-pack that includes writings of Seneca and Epictetus. I didn't care for the translation of Marcus Aurelius in this Stoic six-pack that I got from Amazon. These works are also free on the internet. I would like to say the one thing I did not like about this work is it didn't include the paragraph numbers. Professor Luke Timothy Johnson turned me on to reading the Stoic philosophers. We highly recommend these great course lectures, but they are not on the Great Courses Plus. I also want to remind you that the Low Classical Library, you can get all of these works in both their original language, Greek or Latin, and in English for an affordable annual subscription price. Please click on the link for our blog on Seneca in the description below, and please click on the links for our YouTube videos on the Stoic philosophers and other interesting videos that will broaden your knowledge and improve your soul. Thank you.